These days, when people ask me how my morning's going, I try and give an esoteric response because it's just more fun. And it often goes something like this. I've watched the dark become the light. I have breathed. I have done the 5 rites. The day is good. To which most people then ask, what are the 5 rites? And I go, well, there's some movements that I do every day. And then they ask what they are, and it's kind of hard to describe them without actually showing them. So they've been sneaking around the app for a while. I went through a period this spring when I was, this spring, maybe even last fall, when I was really into getting everyone to try them just to see what sort of changes it made with people's physiology to do it as a warm-up. And then they kind of faded to obscurity as I continued to do them but talked about them less. There's 6 technically, but we don't teach the 6th because most of you aren't ready. Live with it. So the 5 rites. The first is a spin, and the spin happens clockwise. It can go as slowly or as quickly as you need it to, and it is probably the one that causes the most sense of discomfort in most people in the beginning. We also know the least about it. The monks argue that it is an attempt to align the chakras and get them all rotating and spinning in the same direction. I know that kids can spin in circles for hours and be fine with it. I know most adults, when they try, become nauseous pretty quickly. I have found that I went from feeling ill for quite some time when I started doing them to the fact that now I can spin essentially as much as I want, for as long as I want, as quickly as I want, and when I stop, the world can slow down really quickly, and I have no ill effects. I also have noticed when I'm out flying or doing stuff where friends get sort of some motion sickness, I'm not bothered whatsoever. So we're not quite sure on the physiology of what's going on with the spinning, but something cool is happening there, and if someone can figure out what's going on, I'd love to hear what it is. But at this point, I don't know. I just know that it's the first of the 5, and it's the one that I will often allow people to skip. So when we did it whenever I was running through the programming at the gym in the app, I got most people to do 4. We skipped the spinning because I knew a lot of people were getting really nauseous even doing 7 slow spins. And yeah, I thought that we'd give them some grace there. But if we're doing it properly, we start with spinning clockwise. Why clockwise? Because the earth spins counterclockwise, so it has to be clockwise, obviously. The second rite is a supine leg raise. You lie on your back, you lift your legs up, you try and keep your lower back on the floor, and you bring your chin to your chest. The movement is attempted to be done well with really straight legs, flexed feet, and you're trying to exhale as you bring your legs up, and then inhale as you bring legs down. With most movements, if you can, I like to guide the breath by bringing the air out of the body as you compress the ribcage and the diaphragm, and then breathing in as you open things back up. So the leg raise is a bunch of fun. It's also, I've found, one of the items that is very easily scaled to make it much harder. So if you just want to lift your knees up or keep your knees bent, that's really nice. Some people like to just roll their spine and move as deep into it as far as they can, almost like a wagon in yoga. Or a wagon? Yeah, wheel, something like that, some yoga pose. They made up a name, stole some gymnastics. But my issue there is that this movement is much more useful done very, very slowly with very, very good breath intention and a bit of a diaphragmatic lock if you can create it while you breathe and move. And so I like to go as agonizingly slowly as possible while I do my flossing there. It's a really nice nerve floss, so for those of you with any lower back pain or some struggling with some hamstring and calf limitations, it is a nice place to get some movement early in the day. And obviously the knees can be as bent as they need to be when you start with this, but the goal being very straight legs and very much trying to keep the lower back on the ground as we roll up until it has to lift because you're in a pike. Yeah. The third would be the kneeling back extension and then the head floss forward into again, a breath lock. We're looking at just arching the back, opening the front line. We are self-supported with our hands on our lower back or on our bum or on our hamstrings. The difficulty is just based on how far you want to sort of plunge into the movement, and it is one of the movements that I have found the least progression in so far. I think that I probably need to spend more time on it and spend more time focusing on the diaphragmatic lock on the forward chin lock, and really trying to drive that diaphragm up. That seems to be the best response I get on it. James played with doing them really, really fast for a while, but I find with all of these that I really enjoy doing them as slowly as possible, really drive contraction, drive awareness to where I am. So if you have the back flexibility, you can probably really pry it open, and it can be a nice way to open up the shoulders if you're really opening up and rotating backwards well. The scaling on that one is pretty simple because it's just kneeling and arching back and then coming forward, and you just arch as little as possible if you're struggling with that one. Number 4 is a table rock. So at the most basic level, we'd just be lifting our hips and bring them down. I really like this one in that I found that even only just in recent weeks, I've noticed how little my right shoulder is actually rotating open as I'm flossing up my hips. So I've really tried to like pry my right shoulder open. And then on the way back, you can either just bring the hips down and sit, or you can try and floss through and pike really hard. Again, the breath here would be breath out as I pike and breath in as I lift my hips. And I think that if you can get into almost like a float or really active pike when you pull back as far as possible, this can get pretty challenging. I think in a perfect world, it'd be really cool to be in the place to be able to table up or mana up and then floss back through to handstand. I think that'd be like the ultimate progression on this one, but I'm not anywhere close to that. But it'd be a cool thing to do. With all of these, I think there's definitely a way to take it from being a gentle movement into a very advanced, challenging movement, but we're not chasing challenge, we're chasing awareness of breath and movement. So we'll see where I arrive at it. The last one is the classic chaturanga. It's a movement going from sort of a bum high in the air, pushing your hamstrings open, opening your shoulders, and then flossing through. So the easy way to do that would just be to go from bum high to bum low and not bend your arms at all. The medium, harder variation where I spend a lot of my time is just sort of a forward fold, downward dog kind of push-up, and then big back arch and come back up. The thing that challenges people here is they always get their breath wrong. They try and breathe out as they do the push-up, then breathe in as they bring and close their body into a bit of a pike. I found that if we follow the principles of trying to breathe out as we breathe out as we close and breathe in as we open up, this is quite challenging because breathing in through that whole floss, the back arch, is very hard for you. But it will come if you take your time with it. So try and get a good, even, fluid in-breath, we call it an inhale, all the way through and up. It takes a bit of time, and I find I'm most sticky in the morning, and then as the day progresses, it's an easier floss. Those are the 5. So in terms of sets and reps, the goal is to do 21 repetitions of each one of the movements 3 times a day. That's a bit of an overkill for most people and not doable, and it's not a tiny habit, so I'm against starting there. I would say that to try and do 7 reps of each of the 5 movements and doing them once a day is probably a good place to start. If you find you really enjoy them, you can start jumping that repetition up, 7 to 14 to 21, and you can start doing more than once a day. I have found that the days I miss it, on average, I try and give myself 1 day of just deep rest a week where I just don't do any sort of physical loading. And even on those days, I've found the 5 rites kind of sneaking their way in where I'm like, well, it'll just be a little bit of movement after my breath work, and I'll just do gentle variations. So it's fun. I will definitely say that don't get caught up in doing the difficult movement. Try and really get into the intention of being in the body and the breath. There's lots of ways to do training, and this is not a training piece. This is definitely a piece of guided intentional breathing. And I think it's very rewarding. Cody, a buddy of mine, has been doing this now since I introduced him to it. And he says the same thing I do, which is he kind of craves it on the days he doesn't do it. And he feels substantially better with a lot more movement in his diaphragm, his hamstrings are much more mobile, and across the board. I don't know if Cody realizes how much more mobile he is, but he's substantially more mobile, and the biggest thing that I think is impacting that is definitely sort of this daily loading. The monks claim it's the secret to immortality, and if you track down the book that these come from, the story goes that they are the tie to the sort of fountain of youth. A bunch of nerve flosses and some regular core work and some, a bit of push-ups are probably good for anybody to do. So I'm not going to make the claim that they're the fountain of youth, but I think they're really useful. And I think that to start one's day with a little bit of movement when it's easy to let the day get caught up in doing other things might be really good to do. So that's the talk on them. We're going to throw this thing in the app, and so it's easy to watch the variations and sort of jump onto which level of difficulty you'd like to do and try. I like them. I think they're really useful. So have at ye. Sort of give that one a try. See where they take you. See where you move in them. If you find them more challenging than you expect, that's okay. There are still days where if I am really tired from training and other stuff, that I find myself making the variation more simple, more easy, or taking breaks while doing the reps. Good days in the majority, I can do all the reps in a row without any problems. But there's definitely some days I just doing leg raises, and by rep 14, I'm like, I'm just gonna lie on the floor for a second and like do a couple inhale exhales, and then I'm gonna get back into the pattern. So give it a try. I like them a lot. They've been a lot of fun, and I think that they've been, in terms of movement pattern pieces, probably one of the most rewarding to have added to my daily life. So hopefully they work well for you.